An article was put out by friend of the show, Chris Kohler from Kotaku. Great video game journalist. I've had him on the Not So Common podcast. The article is called Deep-Pocketed Collectors Are Fueling a Retro Game Gold Rush. And what this article speaks about, and I'm going to read probably most of it here because I have a lot to say about this article. This has to talk about people that I brought up more and more, people the past 6, 8, 9 months, that because of WATA getting degraded games and because of heritage auctions and Comic Link, Certified Link doing auctions, these are people from the comics world, coin collecting world. They are getting into buying graded games. They see it as the next big thing because they've depleted what's available in their own markets, comic books and coins. So they're getting into this now. And I've met them. I've met a few of them. People have offered me. One person has offered me money for games I have. Overall, I think these are nice people. I don't think they are evil people. I think they might be misguided in their analysis of what's happening. And so that's the only thing I'm going to say here. Not to be too critical of my pal Chris who wrote the article, that this article, before I get into it, doesn't present an alternative perspective on some of the comments, some of the assertions made by people in this article and their their survey of what's happening in the landscape and why the market is heading towards certain directions in their minds versus what's really happening here. And so I'm going to provide the alternative perspective. I wish Chris called me up because I've met some of these people before and recently. I got their cards right here. A couple of people, I almost called one to say, like, did you really mean that in the article? But I'll get into that. So, Retro Game Gold Rush, huh? From Chris Kohler, and I'll link to the article here. I love Chris. Don't hate me, Chris. Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith has spent $500,000 on rare video games, most of it in the last 9 months. Like I said, 6 to 9 months people are getting into this. And she's just getting started. I really just want the best of the best, said Smith, 35. Now, I've met Danielle. We have like a tense, fun rivalry going on. I met her at Too Many Games. She was hanging out at the WATA booth there. And then she was also at Comic-Con less than a month ago. And I spoke to her there as well. So I'll have things to say about Danielle. Hopefully she doesn't try to choke me next time I see her. I'll try to be as nice as I possibly can here, even though I vehemently disagree on some points that are going to be raised here. That said, let's move on. I really just want the best of the best, said Smith, 35. That $500,000 has only bought her around 200 games. Last week, she spent $2,650 on a sealed copy of Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo. Smith, a comic dealer from Florida, is just one of many deep-pocketed collectors who have only recently started splashing out in earnest on games. Comic book people and art people are coming in, and we want rare games that are hard to find, she said. All right, I'll stop right there. And this is where the disagreements start when I have conversations with these people. She just bought Donkey Kong Country. That's one of the most common Super Nintendo games that was ever created. That was a million seller. There were literally millions of Donkey Kong Countries produced, and there are a ton left that still exist today. So already we see a conflation between a rare video game and a common game, very common game, that is sealed, that's in a rare state. Already you see the conflation begin, and that's where the philosophical disagreements start to arise. That's where they exist. And that's why when I talk about sealed game collectors, they're not video game collectors, because if they were, they'd be satisfied with even a complete in-box copy of Donkey Kong Country, which is easy to find. It'll cost you, $30, $40? But no, it's already a conflation that people want rare games that are hard to find. But that's not what they're collecting. They're collecting sealed games of very common games or any other variety of availability. Moving on. This is Chris talking now. Even longtime video game collectors like myself have been stunned at the news as of late. Games that just a few years ago might have only sold for a few $1,000s are quickly exploding into 5- and 6-figure valuations. First, there was a sealed copy the sealed copy of Super Mario Bros. Sold on eBay for $30,000. This year, an earlier print of the game sold for $100,150. That was the sticker sealed ones that we talked about. That one of the ex-owners, CEOs of Heritage Auctions bought. So it's kind of weird. It was bought by 3 people. Okay, going back. And it's not just the first Super Mario that's powered up in price. By now, you've probably heard the story of the sealed copy of the NES Classic Kid Icarus that just sold for $9,000. We talked about that. Sales of sealed games are shattering records left and right. If you want to know why, just follow the money. Numerous sources speaking to Kotaku for the story have all said the same thing. The past 2 years have seen an influx of new money coming into the classic game collecting scene. Chris, why wasn't I a source? Primarily high-end collecting experts from other areas of interest like comic books, magic cards, and coins. They see video games as the next big thing. Like a mint condition Action Comics issue 1 might be the ultimate trophy of nostalgia for the superhero age of the mid-20th century, so too might a sealed Mario be the perfect bottling of the pop culture moments of the 1980s. And these new collectors are ready to spend to get their hands on the best, rarest, mintiest copies because they've seen what happened in their collecting fields when prices starting to rise. Here's the difference again. The rarest comics, Action Comics #1, Detective Comics 27, which aren't even the rarest comics, by the way. There's rarer comics than that. That's the only way you can exist a comic book in that fashion, is by owning the comic book. When it comes to a Donkey Kong Country, and I'll go back to that because that's the example here, you can get a Donkey Kong Country cart. You can get a complete in box Donkey Kong Country, even a minty complete in box Donkey Kong Country. But just because it's not sealed, to these people, it's not worth anything to them. But it's still the same item. That doesn't exist when it comes to magic cards, when it comes to coins. There's no difference between there's no sealed coin versus a regular coin. They're all coins. Yes, of different condition, but they're all coins. The same with comic books. They're all comic books, just with different conditions here. I truly believe, this quote, I truly believe that we are on the brink of something really epic and incredible happening, said Smith, who says she's recently been selling off rare comics to fund more video game buys. Well, the comics market, this is what happened with the comics market. You have people get in from the art world and others and drive the prices up because they had money to spend. And from what I've heard from comic dealers, this started happening a lot more with the housing crisis. Because usually you could invest in real estate, and that was always the surefire bet. Not with the housing crisis, and not. A lot of people are like, what the hell do I do? So they started buying art. They started buying comic books, containers of wealth, we'll just say. Not really necessarily just to even enjoy the pieces that they bought, but they were containers of wealth, hedges against the stock market, against real estate, and against U.S. cash values, I guess, and their 401k, things of that nature. So what you have to keep in mind when this article that Chris has written, and it's a good article overall, I just disagree with keeping out alternative perspectives, is that Danielle has a vested interest in saying that they are on the brink of something really epic and incredible happening, because these are the people that are putting the money to try to create that epic moment to happen, if that makes sense. This is an extremely biased quote, and there's more in the article, obviously. There's no perspectives of people that have been collecting for 20 years and dealers that have been selling for 20 years responding to some of the insane things that have been happening to say something to the effect of, well, I think these people might be going overboard, or they're overestimating the interest in some of these games, or they're overestimating the rarity of some of these games versus some of these comics, these rare comics that they own, for example. Moving on. Thus far, the world of classic video game collecting has been mostly driven by avid gamers seeking complete sets of games for a certain platform. That's true when it comes to NES, and that's the reason NES games, Pat here speaking, not Chris Kohler. That's true when it comes to NES games. So there's no reason at all that a lot of garbage half-star, one-star Color Dreams games should be worth $100, like Moon Ranger or Mermaids of Atlantis. The only reason those games are worth $80, $100, $200 or more is because of idiots like me that need to buy it in order to complete a collection. The only reason Steam Events is worth that much money is because of completionists. Collector completionists, not collectionists. We'll get into that later. That's a semi-spoiler for a later topic. That's the only reason why. It hasn't happened to the same level of hype, though, when it comes to Super Nintendo and some of the other systems. And I know that because I just did a certain Super Nintendo guidebook. And when going through and discovering that there was a lot of rare and very uncommon games I didn't know about. When I started looking up the price on eBay for some of those rare games, I was shocked that many of them were below $20 or $25. Some are below $10. And I won't say which ones, I don't want to artificially drive the market, but I picked up a couple that seemed like cool games and they were hard to find. But I was like, wow, I picked one up for like $25. I picked one up for $15. If those were NES games, those would have been $150, $200, $250. I picked up Super Nintendo games for cheap that were like on the level of rarity of like Power Blade 2. And that's like a $300 game, I think, at this point, probably. But on the Super Nintendo, they're like $25, $30, maybe $40. So it's happened with other systems, but the completionist mindset never, to me, got past the NES collectors. And Ian agrees with me. It's on Ian right now. It didn't happen with Super Nintendo to that same level. It definitely didn't happen with PS1 and PS2. I think it stopped with the NES. Yeah, there are probably some Super Nintendo, people that are getting the full set. Not the same level it happened with NES. Moving on. Oh, okay. That's what caused Stadium Events, an unremarkable and largely forgotten exercise game from the 1980s, to become for a time the most desired, rarest Nintendo entertainment system game. You couldn't complete your set without it, so up went the price, even though by itself it held almost no nostalgic appeal. And Chris is right. Just echo what I said. You show Stadium Events to someone on the street, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. But you show anyone Mario, and they can sing you the jingle from the first level, says Denise Kahn, the president, or is it Dennis? I think it's Dennis Kahn, the president of Wild Games. I met the guy, very nice guy. A company that authenticates and assesses collectible video games. I'm sorry, I said Denise. That's a female name. Dennis with a Z. That's what Danielle Smith and others like her want. They want something that matches their comic collections, a small batch of games representing key moments in gaming in the best condition possible. Again, in the best condition possible, that's key here. This is what separates them from being regular video game collectors who don't need it in the best condition possible. A sticker-sealed early copy of Super Mario, a sealed Metroid, a first print Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Although she's been collecting comics for 15 years. 15 years. This is where I would ask a question if I was Chris or write about it. How did you... Okay, I'm going to finish this paragraph, then I'm going to get back to this thought. Smith's personal collection only numbers around 90 books that, even encased in their protective plastic slabs, fit into 3 small boxes. But those boxes contain an Action Comics issue 1. The first appearance of Superman that Smith estimates to be worth around $750,000. I don't know when she's bought that, but in the past 15 years, that's always been an expensive comic. That's always been the most expensive comic book. That Detective Comics 27. She's also got a Detective Comics 27. The first appearance of Batman. So this is when I start talking about, if I was writing this article, who are the types of people getting into this? And obviously these are the upper echelon. These are the 1% out there that can afford to buy graded Golden Age comics. Apparently starting in their early 20s, they had the money to do this. And that's what I'm going to get back to. And I'm not trying to take a crap on rich people. I'm not. But this is a rich people's hobby/sport. It's not for you or me. I can't get into this. I can't drop $6,000 on a sealed Donkey Kong, a graded Donkey Kong country. Oh, excuse me, $2,600. I can't do that with regularity. I might be maybe do it once or twice before I worry about my mortgage. I can't do that. And I definitely can't I can't even drop the money I want to drop on an Amazing Fantasy 15 grade because the price keeps going up 20% each year because of the volume of trading between these sort of people. And so that was the first thing I'd focus on writing these articles. Like, these are people that either came from money or got in so early on the coin market and comic book market and magic market and made their money off of the volume of trading there and the speculation that now these people have moved into this field and are trying to do the same thing to make money and capitalize off of the fervor, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, which is driving now these people to now buy all these games, to show up at too many games that I saw and buy every black box game that was a sticker sealed game. It was sealed, but is a sticker sealed variant first version, even games like golf and games like baseball, and buying them all to hoard and speculate that the game that's worth only $25, $30 now, 10 years from now, they think will be worth thousands of dollars. They've done that already with Magic cards. They bought all the ones they could there early on. They bought all the comic books they could in order to have the market encase what they think that the value of what these games should be. They're now attempting and doing it with sealed games right now. They're buying them all up. They're buying all the black box games that are sticker sealed that aren't even sealed. They are hoarding them because they think this is happening, but they are creating it out of their own FOMO, their own fear of missing out. They are competing against each other in this small group of people, very small group of people. This is less than this is probably less than 0.5% of all video game collectors out there are into the sealed games. It's not 10%, which is what Danielle tried to tell me in person. I thought that was funny. It's not even 1%, I think, of video game collectors are into sealed. If you want to make an argument for 1%, I'll probably be with you maybe, but it's definitely not 10%. Okay. All right. So, okay, moving on. Okay, next one here. These books are extremely rare and valuable in any condition, but Super Mario Brothers, Metroid Punch-Out are some of the most common NES games out there. In this case, the condition drives the value. A loose copy of Metroid with no box is a $5 game. 10 to 15, Chris, but whatever. But a mint-sealed first print copy is so difficult to find that its price would be more like 5 figures. Someone said, quote, there's a lot of copies of that game, so you don't want to buy more than one copy. Smith said a collector told her at one point about Punch-Out. And they're like, there's 50 sealed copies. And my mind was kind of like, what the hell? Like, that's Action 1 rarity. So the first thing I would say about that is that I don't know how a collector would be so sure about the number of sealed games out there for one particular one. Just because, and this goes back to Tim Atwood and other collectors, but probably Tim Atwood's the big one, but he's an example that the exception to the rule, but there are other exceptions, that there are collectors out there we don't know about that have games that we don't know about because they remain private. And that goes with rare games and probably some sealed ones as well. Because to me, the 3 or 4 older guys that I know that are in collecting, when I say older guys, in like their 60s, that I've seen locally here, and some had very rare stuff. Like one guy had a Steam events that he got in the 90s, for example. Another guy had every rare Sega CD and Sega Saturn game that I bought a bunch from him like 3-4 years ago. He was getting out of the hobby. But there are guys out there that were collecting in the early 90s that were buying up, content from either toy stores going out of business, but from a lot of mom and pop rental stores that went out of business in the 90s. These guys went in and got all their stuff. I'm not saying they're all rare games, but there's some rare ones in there. I'm not saying they're all sealed games, but these are guys that were doing this sort of thing, sticking these games out in the 90s. And I'm not sure we know about all of them yet. I'm not saying there's 1,000 of these guys, but there's probably at least a few dozen of them out there, in my estimation, that we just don't know about here. Okay, so 50 copies of sealed of Punch-Out. Okay. Joshua Enton, 43, a lawyer from Fort Lauderdale, is another longtime Golden Age comic collector who's jumped into the deep end of the pool with video game collecting over the last 2 years. He got into the collecting bug from his dad, blah, 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 blah. The last 2 years, he spent about $75,000 buying up about 200 NES games, a sealed Zelda, a sealed Mario, etc. He first saw the appeal of collecting games when he saw a game that had been authenticated and created by Dennis Kahn's company, Wata Games. It's interesting that Wata Games, they marketed themselves better, closer to what CGC was than what VGA. VGA dropped the ball. The Video Game Authority, those guys dropped the ball. They could have been this, but they weren't. They haven't been this, and now people aren't even talking about VGA anymore. Plus, we talked about how Wata was doing a better job because they had guys that from the video game collecting scene that knew about sealed games to authenticate. They were really more of an authority than VGA, and that's why we liked Wata. But I guess they did a better job marketing and having the comics and cards guys and coin guys find out about them. It's a panel of experts, Wata, that assesses collectible games, assigns them a numerical condition rating, and seals them in an attractive plastic display case. I did see one of their games in a prototype case and was blown away by it. Enton said it was sealed, it was nostalgic. I thought it presented incredibly well. It presented incredibly well, means it displays well. And that's when he wanted to get the games himself. Okay. The high-profile emergence of Wata Games onto the scene last year seems to have been the inflection point that caused many comic collectors to get interested in games. Talked about that before. I'm going to try to truncate this now. Wata was attracting new collectors in a way VGA has not. I talked about that. And Wata aligned with Heritage Auctions. And once I knew that was going to happen, it was going to be game over. You're going to have more and more people get into this. And that's what happened. So you have Heritage now auctioning. They've auctioned coins and comics forever. And now and cards, I believe, and now they're doing the video game stuff that we talked about. All right, and they have a grading scale that's similar to the comics and coins, so people can get along with it. And that was by design, according to Dennis Kahn from WATA. All right, they're talking about how there's now Universal parks, and comic books are not just the comic books or the Marvel Universe. They have movies and stuff, and so now that's happening with Universal parks with Nintendo. Blah blah blah. Pikachu movie, Sonic movie. More quotes about how important Metroid's going to be, or if a movie comes out, or a Zelda movie, the price is going to go up. Speculation. Dennis Kahn sees the 8-bit NES era of the mid-'80s as the parallel to the golden age of comics, the days of Superman and Batman, characters that have survived for nearly a century. There were comic books before Superman, and those early Platinum Age books are much rarer than even Action Comics #1, but practically nobody's interested in them. That's probably what I see as well. That's true. 100 years from now, people will see Atari games as weird oddities, but they won't care about them because the properties won't matter anymore in terms of those early Atari games versus the NES games era with Zelda and Metroid and Link and Mario and Donkey Kong. Like, those guys are going to live on 100 years. Centipede will not, in people's eyes, by and large. So Dennis said there are some that I know spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on games in the past year, and he gets offers from other collectors looking to buy his games from him every day. Oh, that's not Dennis. That was the other collector I talked about, the 43-year-old lawyer. Sorry, that was Josh. Okay. And now they're discovering all the variants, like the different versions of Super Mario Brothers, etc. The sticker sealed. There's a different version from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Things like that. They're trying to get the very first print run of these games. Chris says in his article, most longtime game collectors aren't so obsessive about these details. There are some that have always been into the hang tab versus non-hang tab, the Rev A, which is, basically the second print run of a game versus, the 3-screw versus the 5-screw. But with some games, the 5 screws came first. With some games, it switches on some games depending on when they started making them. For example, some are rare than others, depending. So, and some are 3 screws more rare, for some are 5 screws more rare. All right. There always were a few veteran collectors who had long obsessed over print runs and variations. Damn it, Chris, you're talking about this stuff right after I am. It seems like I'm copying you, or you're copying me. But they mostly shared their knowledge with each other, buried in pages of scattershot forum posts and on message boards. Okay, this is a paragraph that might be troublesome. There wasn't a lot of education available for video games, Danielle Smith said. She attended a recent classic gaming convention, Too Many Games, in Philadelphia earlier this year, and it was like she was speaking a different language. I was surprised at how little knowledge some dealers that have been doing this for, I don't want to say this in a negative way, so please don't think I am, but they had no idea that, like a Left Bro, Super Mario 3 was a first print. So what she's referring to is the first Super Mario Brothers 3 carts and boxes. The Brothers was originally on the left, and they thought it was aesthetically pleasing. So in the second print runs, they put it on the right side there. I was a little mind blown by that because I'm like, this is your job, she said. I think that's also why they've been so undervalued for so long. This is the one thing I would have loved to have gotten clarity from Chris. How is she so sure that the dealers, did she straight up ask them, did you know this was a variant, to these dealers she spoke to? Because I spoke to a dealer that she dealt with at Too Many Games. I spoke to that dealer this past weekend at Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. And from his perspective, he feels like he was misrepresented in this article as one of these dealers who don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because to him, yeah, he knows about the variant, but it wasn't like the price difference was that big a difference between the regular complete in box that he had to like mark it up. Because most people may not even care about that difference. If they're looking for Super Mario Bros. 3, especially to play, like a cart, they won't give a shit. Just get me a Super Mario Bros. 3. Give me that $15, $20 game, that $10, $12 game. They don't care about it. And this goes back to what I think, like a lot of people that complete sets, a lot of times they don't go for the first print of it. They just want to get one. Like, I think my cart is definitely a first print run Super Mario Brothers. The box, I don't even give a shit to check. on the box. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't care. It's over there. I haven't checked it yet. I will probably after the podcast. A lot of us just don't care. That doesn't mean we don't know. We just don't care about it. But this is a degree of arrogance that I think has to be accounted for, because someone like Danielle here didn't have the knowledge about this until someone told her. This is someone that didn't start collecting video games, if you want to call her a video game collector, until 9 months ago. Someone had to either write an article or inform her that this was a variant that she should be on the lookout for, or the Mike Tyson Punch-Out thing, which, that's something like, wow, that's kind of news to me even. I'm like, oh, I didn't know there was a difference in the box, because I never looked out for it, I didn't care. I did know about the Super Mario Brothers 3, but I know about things that maybe Danielle doesn't know about. I know for sure because I told her about a Gyromite box variant at Comic-Con that she didn't know about. That was a lot rarer than what the Super Mario Brothers 3 is. The non-hang tab Gyromite box is extremely rare and hard to find, because they transferred over from the 5-screw Gyromites to the 3-screw Gyromites. Okay? And then at the same time, they got rid of the hang tab box. And I told Danielle this in person at Comic-Con. And not to brag or to say that I knew more than her, but to let her know that there were so many weird little things when it came to not just variants, but different things to watch out for in different video game consoles. When you're collecting NES versus Super Nintendo versus Master System versus Sega Saturn versus TurboGrafx versus N64, there are so many nuances and things that you have to know and be trained on system to system. That's why it's so difficult to become a video game seller or to open a store, because it's not like comic book collecting at all. What is, I got to know about key issues. I got to know about this comic from the 60s is worth a lot. This one from the 30s or 40s. It's a hell of a lot easier to wrap your mind up around key issues than it is like, what's the difference between the 4th print run of Super Mario Brothers versus the 2nd versus the 1st? Was there a cart color change to a certain N64 game? Like the Turok, was it the Turok Rage Wars? That gray one that they shipped out to a few people, and now, they had made for the bug that was done. Differences in hang tabs on games. Why is Tecmo Super Bowl 2 hard to find, but Tecmo Super Bowl 3 is more common? But does no one care about that? There's a lot of things to watch out for when it comes to video game collecting. That this is, to me, arrogant, because this is someone that's getting into the hobby, if you want to call it, and thinking they know more than these people selling these video games for sometimes 10, 15, 20 years. And by and large, some of these people are collectors. Most of them are. Some of them aren't. But to me, I'm sticking up for video game sellers out here because it's a hard thing. And just because you may know a couple little details doesn't mean you know everything. And it doesn't mean what you think is important means that it's important to these video game sellers, because they're not making money off of the Super Mario Brothers 3 variant. That's not the way they're making a living. They're not making money off of some of these box variants, because the people that they sell to aren't you. They are buying just carts by and large. So they don't give a shit, because they're actually playing the games, a lot of the people they sell to. Even some of the collectors that are buying the carts or complete in box, they are playing the games. So they don't give a shit about what is the first box for Super Mario Brothers. They don't care about the first Mario 3 box or the first, you know what I mean? They don't care, because they are video game collectors. They are playing the games. So I think this was a statement that was very out of line. It just shows a lack of knowledge of what video game collecting is. And I wish there was a follow-up about that quote. Because if a video game vendor has a Super Mario Bros. 3 cart, and it is the first print of it, and puts the brothers to the left, and then tries to sell it for 3 or 4 times the value, tries to sell it for $60, most of the people that see that cart are going to be like, well, I'm not paying $60, $75 for the first print Super Mario Bros. Cart. I'm fine with the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th print runs, because I just want to play what to me is one of the best platformers ever created. I don't give a shit that this came out 6 months before this other version. I don't care. I just want to play the game. And again, this goes back to my first point, conflating video game collecting and collecting what they think is rare versus just wanting the sealed version of something or the first print of something. It's 2 entirely different things. Smith, under the other name, Nerdy Girl Comics, is one of the few remaining comic vendors that still sets up shop at San Diego Comic-Con. No, there's more than a few. There's about I'm trying to take the trade paperbacks out of there. There's about 20 to 25 video game video game comic vendors at Comic-Con. But yeah, it is a minority though. Probably 20. There's probably 20 to 25. I'm selling older comics. Okay, blah, 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 blah. She's collecting them, not really for sale. It was astounding to me how many people came to my booth and were more excited about video games and comic books. I wonder if she brought my name up, because I was at her booth talking to her for a half hour. Mostly in good fun and jest, but trying to educate. And she was annoyed, by the way, that I found that she was annoyed that I found I hope Danielle doesn't hate me. She was annoyed that I found the sticker seal Super Mario Brothers first or second print, whatever, but it was a sticker seal beat up. But I found it at a vendor, literally 150 feet away from her at the event. And I brought it up there, and she tried to play it cool, oh, that's nothing, it's beat up. And even the guy next to her, the comic guy, had to say, Danielle, the guy paid like $30 for that. I mean, it's a find. You would have bought it in a second. Well, he didn't say that, but he was thinking that. I just thought it was funny. She sold the Punch Out there. That's what's going to happen more and more, she said. They come into their mid-30s or maybe early 40s. They have established careers, and this becomes a grail for them. Again, this shows a lack of knowledge of what people are willing to settle for. Because the video game collecting happened already. Usually when you get to your early mid-20s, that's when the video game collecting happened. When you had the console 15, 20 years ago, that's what happened to me. Late 90s, I had the console 12, 13 years ago. I got into it. But people are quite okay. Most people don't have $2,600 to drop on a sealed Donkey Kong Country. But everyone has $50 to drop on a Donkey Kong Country cart in the box, or $20 on a Donkey Kong cart itself. And 99.9%, 99% of people will be satisfied with that. And that's what's allowed video game collecting to thrive. That people weren't only interested in just the boxed games or just the sealed games. They were okay having a cart, because that's, as a kid, that's what they had. They had the cartridge. They threw out the boxes. That's the reason Danielle doesn't realize. The reason why she thinks these games are so rare, the sealed ones, is because people opened up the games and played them. So they're wanting to actually use the product is the reason why she can speculate and hoard these games, and others like her, is because the games were used properly as the commodity and product that they were created to be. Khan agrees. For every speculator that comes in for comics, I think there's at least 2 guys from comics are coming in simply because they play these games too. They love it. They're collectors at heart, and they see something new and exciting they want to get involved with. I don't agree with that. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of these. I've seen some of these sealed guys. I don't agree that these guys are coming in because they love these video games. Because again, they'd be satisfied with just buying the cartridge if that was the case. I don't agree with that wholesale. Yeah, there's probably some. I don't see this 2-for-1 ratio happening at this point. Chris writes, that doesn't mean the field is free of blatant speculation. One thing that a lot of the people who are coming in from comics are doing that I don't do, said Joshua Enton, is buying every copy of sealed Super Mario Brothers, 11th or 12th print, whatever it is that they can get their hands on. So, and that's what's happening. I know that for a fact, that they are now trying to buy every single copy they can. I had one person self-described say, yes, he was a hoarder of these games. Self-described. I'm hoarding these games. And that happens with rare comics as well. I'm sure with rare Magic cards, I'm sure people have 20 Black Orchids or what have you. I'm sure it's happened with coins. And that's what not only increases the price, because volume trading increases prices naturally. The more something's bought, the more people think it's worth money. It doesn't matter if it's 20 people buying it or just one buying them all up. We saw that with the Rampart Game Boy cartridge 3 or 4 years ago on this very podcast. Someone set out to prove a point that they could raise the price of a Game Boy game no one cared about. It went from a $6 game to $25, $30, whatever it was, in the matter of weeks, because they bought it all. Volume trading, buying it as fast as they can. Other sellers see the trend, they increase the price or match the higher price, and then it's a self-perpetuating loop when it comes to pricing. As the prices rise on first print games, some veteran collectors might find that unbeknownst to them, they have a $10,000 game sitting on their shelf, stuck in among their finds from the dollar bin. Some of them might decide it's time to cash out. If this is all temporary bubble, their right to get paid while they're getting is good. But what if it's not? Well, that's the thing now, because I know what I have that these people would want. My deluxe Super Nintendo entertainment system set, the test market one, I have pristine copies of Gyromite and pristine copies of Duck Hunt in there. The Duck Hunt's been opened. I'm not sure the Gyromite's been opened in there. Sticker sealed games. And I'm not saying this to advertise this, but at some point, if someone want to offer me a ton of money for these, I'd be foolish not to turn it down, especially if, to me, having a complete in-box copy that's sticker sealed, what have you, worth $50 only, and I at least have an extra Gyromite sticker seal in okay condition, probably a 6 or 7, but that one's like a 10. I can replace it and I'd be fine mentally. Same with Duck Hunt. The vendor next to me, the sealed WATA vendor, again, nice guy, he told me it's possible that someone would offer me, or at auction, the Gyromite that might have been opened once but the sticker seals intact could go for 40, 50 grand. And he said it with a straight face, if it was graded. And it came in at like, a high grade, like I guess a 9 or a 9.5 or a 10 or whatever, or 9.8. And I'm like, okay, may not do it tomorrow, but that's something to think about. If I need the money, why not? I paid $20 for that that set. New Jersey had everything but the console, actually. And it had the games, the controllers, ROM, and everything. I had to pair it with an under $100,000, 100,000 serial number unit, console unit. It's like, okay, sure. Why not? By the way, that vendor on Sunday told me, I asked him how he did, and I think he sold like 1 or 2 sealed games the whole weekend at Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. And that's not a small expo. There was at least 2,000 to 3,000 people there over the weekend. To let you again know how many video game collectors are actually into the sealed stuff. They'll at least come out to these events because they really don't do it by and large. It'll be interesting to see what happens at Portland later this year, for sure. Let's see. The same thing happens in every mature collectible industry. Con said, comics, coins, baseball cards. People for decades were like, the prices are crazy. I'm selling out. I can't handle this anymore. And for 20 years, and they're like, what the hell was I thinking? See, the reason I disagree with that statement is because the only way for commodities, products to rise in value to an insane degree is for games before that to be sold. So, for example, let's just say I have an NWC Gold card, which I do. Let's just say 20 years from now, that's going to be I'm not saying it's going to be, but let's just say it happened to be 10 years from now, a $5 million game. And I sold it next year for $250,000, hypothetically. The only reason that it's a $5 million game 10, 20 years from now, 5 years from now, is because someone like me had to sell it at a lower price for the price to climb. It's hard for something to jump from a small price, like we'll just say $100,000 NWC, which I've turned down, gold. It's hard for that to jump from $100,000 to $5 million with nothing in between to justify the transaction price, if that makes sense. So I don't see why people would be regretful of that, because first of all, there's no guarantee. It's very few cases that's going to happen, and they need the money now. So the money now, the small amount of money now is worth more than potential money you may or may not get 5, 10, 20 years from now. That's just the way things work out. Not everyone can afford to sit on stuff they know can sell for a lot of money for 10, 15, 20 years because they need the money now. They've got kids. They got to pay off their mortgage. They got college loans. They want to go on vacation. They got a wedding coming up. They got to for themselves or for their daughter. These are situations that these 1% people, collectors doing this, they don't have to worry about that. Other collectors like you out there, you would have to think about, okay, what if I have something that's worth $50,000 now, but it's worth $1 million 20 years from now? You may not have that option to sit on it and wait. You may need that $50,000 now. To you, that could be a lifesaver. So I don't agree with that entirely. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but most people don't have the luxury not to get the money they can now. Like the guy who sold the Kid Icarus. Yeah, he sold it for $9,000. Maybe it's $50,000 or some wacko, years from now, but he wants the $9,000 now. He needs the money now. I don't fault him for that, and you shouldn't either. It's not something to be ashamed of either. That's why I think a lot of these guys coming over from comics and coins are seeing this and willing to buy when these guys are selling, even if it's over market, he said. And it is over market. I've seen it. It's way over market. I think ultimately the market's going in an upward trajectory, but you're going to have your dips here and there because that's a lot of speculation. Again, and I met these people, but they're very biased in them, saying it's going to go in an upward direction because their businesses, whether it's WATA or Heritage Auctions, relies on this being an upward trend. And I think with WATA, do they get a percentage grading it of what the graded games will sell for. Let me look that up real quick. What the policy is here, because I don't want to misrepresent WATA. What the price is. What is the price here? How much will it cost to certify my game? Service levels. So okay. So they do it based upon declared value. Okay. So at least it's not CGC. CGC, a lot of their high end, they take like a percentage of what the comic costs in order to grade it. It's weird. So they base it upon declared value. So if the declared value is $500 plus, it's $65 to grade it for a sealed or loose game, and $85 for a box game, and then it's a little bit less there. So you're looking at maximum $85. That's actually not a terrible value. It's actually not, just because the case itself costs them money, obviously, and then obviously there's an upcharge there for them to do the labor there. But most games under $500, you're looking at $40 for complete box / box. That's actually not bad. That's about, I think, what VGA charged a little bit more than that there. So that's good there. And then there's other things like game testing's $5 to make sure it works, things like that, graders report there. But still, I mean, WATA's doing great, and good for them for providing a business model that actually works versus VGA. And then obviously Comic Link Exchange or Certified Link, whatever, people I met at Comic-Con, they're making a lot of money off of this. And then Heritage is making a ton. From what I hear, Heritage Heritage Auctions makes not just doesn't take this just a buyer's fee of 20%. They take a percentage from the seller, which I've never heard of in my absolute life before. So they're making bank off of this stuff here. And this is the end of the article here. This is a long topic, but it's very dear to my heart. It's anyone's guess whether this moment in classic video game collecting will be looked back as a flash in the pan speculation bubble of the moment when everything's changed for good. Okay, I'm sorry, I totally misread that. It's anyone's guess whether this moment in classic video game collecting will be looked back on as a flash in the pan speculation bubble, or the moment when everything changed for good. But it's no small thing that many seasoned collectors are betting serious money on the upward trend continuing. But these seasoned collectors aren't video game collectors. I think that's what we have to keep in mind. They have a different perspective of this, and they have more money than the average video game collector. So, is it a speculation bubble? Sure. But that bubble can continue to grow as long as these people can spend the money. What's going to happen, though, I think it's going to take a while. The same thing with comic books. What happens when these guys that are in their 60s, 70s, with these comic books that are worth tons of money, what happens when they all go? They all have to pass everything down. There has to be replacement buyers. And unless the younger generation agrees that this stuff is worth a ton of money, it may not be a bubble that bursts, but they're not going to be able to make money back on some of these games. They won't. There's between 30, I say this to these people, there's between probably 30 and 50 games that are significant in the pantheon of video games culturally and historically that are rare enough and important enough that'll probably command prices decades down the line, like huge prices. Whether it's your Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, your NWC carts, has to be rare and significantly historical. And when I say Super Mario Bros., yeah, if you want that first print run, it's going to be rare enough and people are going to want it enough. But for stadium events, probably not. And for a random Donkey Kong Country, I don't know about that. That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah. There you have it. It's one of my longest topics ever, but I feel it was very important to get these thoughts out there in a way that hopefully was coherent and was the alternative viewpoint that I wish showed up in this article, to sort of say, like, well, that's a possibility the upward trend will continue within your group of, like, whatever you want to say, 50, 100, 150 people spending all this money, but is it sellable outside of your group to other people? It's going to have to be, because you're not going to be around forever to capitalize this. Or is it just really inner niche collecting competition? That's what I see it as at this point. And again, 99% of video game collectors will be okay having their cart or complete in box copy even. They'll be satisfied. I'm satisfied. I don't have many sealed games. I don't need it. It's the same thing. It's all good.